Welcome once again to the stage, and thank you for being with us. Last week, we started a discussion with a very, very amazing young person, our guest, Dike Chukwumerije, in which we talked about the things that have shaped him to be what he is. One of the best known nationalists we have, a young man with a passion for this country, who, through thick and thin, even during our darkest moments, has continued to believe in us as a country, in us as a great country, in us as one, detribalized, each of us wanting the best for this country. And so last week, Dike talked about the things that made him, shaped him to be what he is. And this week, we promised you that we were going to delve further into that discussion. We are now here in our today. How should we all move forward together, Dike, to make our positive reality a reality, a living reality, if I may use the word?
Thank you for the question. I really appreciate it. And I think that there are many practical steps that we need to begin to take. I believe that the greatest, or to use the term, Nigeria's original sin is tribalism. Is the fact that historically we've been unable to overcome the limitations of tribalism, particularly when it comes to decision making in the political sphere. We're just unable to assess people on their merit. We constantly assess people on the basis of the ethnic or religious groups they belong to. And it makes us make suboptimal decisions when it comes to who represents us as a government. And as young people, we need to begin to rise above this. Because politicians, being people who essentially want power, know our pressure points. They know our things that trigger people to sort of retreat back into that ethno-regional herd mentality. So we know that if we start talking about Biafra to Igbo people, their blood will rise. We know that if we begin to talk about the Sharia or January 15 in the north, you're going to get a reaction. Politicians know this and they push those buttons in order to discourage people from individual thinking. Thinking is being able to assess somebody and look, this person, are they the best person for this office? And when somebody wants you to stop thinking like that and instead start thinking like, look, you are an Igbo person, look at him like an Igbo person, or look at him like a Yoruba person, or come on, look at him like an Hausa person. They begin to throw these issues, you know? And we have to become resistant to this way of thinking. And so for young people, I always advocate that one, learn the history, not the propaganda. Learn really what happened in our past, where are we coming from? Two, make a decision to forgive. Make a conscious decision to forgive and let go. We cannot keep sacrificing our present to pay for our past. We must use our present to pursue our future. Make a decision to let bygones be bygones. From here, let's go forward. Number three, we must relearn. We must find new ways of talking to each other. We must begin to, you see, in our history, in our education, we're programmed to see difference, different language, different religion, what about the things that we share in common? We are blind to those things because that's not how we're raised. So begin to look and see how much you have in common with that person from the other tribe. It may be the fact that you both went to the same school. You both have the same experience of coming out and looking for a job and not finding it. You both have the NYSC experience. You both know how it is to not have light in your house, not have water. You both know what it's like to want to travel and your heart is in your mouth because you don't know if you're going to get safely to the next city, if you're going to be robbed, or you're going to have an accident. You both know the anxiety of, a parent or a sibling is ill and you're not sure whether the hospital will be on strike and there'll be, these are things that we share in common. Some of the things, we share food, we share music, we share fashion, we share movies, we share football, we share so much in common. Learn to use that language, learn to use these things and begin to create a language that allows all of us to be aware of this shared reality. And then we need to begin to organize on the basis of our shared interest, as opposed to our historical differences. As Nigerians, we want a better life. We want to be able to live in a country where when you travel and you bring out that passport, you do it with pride.
That green passport.
That green passport, you do it with pride. I want my children to know the pride of being a Nigerian. I want to live in a country where education is qualitative and accessible. Healthcare, I always tell people that Nelson Mandela died in a hospital a few streets down from his house. You know, for us, when we face that, we are flying our parents from India to Germany, dragging people around in their last months from country to country. It's so dehumanizing. I want to live in a country where if my father says he wants to die in the village, there is a good hospital there where he can die in a place that is familiar to him, amongst people that are familiar to him, and live his last days in dignity. These are things that if I talk to my counterparts in Borno, in Kaduna, in Kano, and we talk about these things, all of us will say, yes, I agree.
Okay, let me stop you. Not because what you've said is pregnant in depth and richness. And so sometimes I stop and recap a few of it. You've talked about the fact that we need to know our history, really, as much as, if possible, an unbiased history. A history, you know, about where we came from, and therefore which allows us to know where we're going. I'm going to ask you to come down a bit further and tell us in practical terms, if you say, know your history, how does one do it? If textbooks are not written, if people are so willing to tell different versions of the same story, how can one critically know your history? If you say, don't respond to those triggers, how does one learn not to do so? And if you say, see your commonalities, how? Again, I'm going to ask you, how? What are your suggestions towards that?
So for instance, with learning history, learn to read or listen. There are alternative versions of history. Every side has its version. Learn to listen to every side with an open heart. Don't take it for granted that what your father and mother told you is the truth.
It is the way they saw it.
It's the way they saw it. Somebody, for instance, I'm an Igbo person, and I get this a lot. Somebody will say, my father told me that during the war, such and such happened. Many times your father may have been in his 20s, in his 30s, in one segment. He didn't have a bird's eye view of what was happening on all the fronts in the war. He just gave you, it's not that what he said was a lie, but his perspective. So you need to know this and listen to everybody with an open mind and ask yourself objectively without trying to defend any position or validate anything that you actually know, really what happened. This is how at some point, I began to approach my history. I said, you know what, I don't care who is at food. I just want to know what happened. And I also began to humanize everybody. Look, these guys my dad was in his 20s. These guys were young. I'm in my 40s now. I can imagine in my 20s, I'm having to make these big decisions and all that. There's no way I'm going to get every call right. You know, the same with Awo or Zeke or Ojukwu or Gowon. They were just young people trying to make the best of a very difficult situation that they were thrown in. And the decisions they took may not have been the best for all time, all season. And it's for us, their children, their grandchildren, to look back and say, okay, here they got it right, but here they didn't have enough information. So the decision they made here was suboptimal. It's not a commentary on them. It's just they did the best with what they knew. But 40, 50 years later, with technology, I know more than they knew in 1960. I know more about sociology and anthropology and culture and people than they knew. So somebody who in the 50s thought that Igbo and Yoruba are two different races, today I know that it's very likely that Igbo and Yoruba came from the same place, the same people. And there are similarities in their culture and in their language that indicates that these two tribes may have evolved from an earlier single tribe. This is information that they may not have had easily accessible in the 40s and 50s. So you have to read your history with an objective, not going in there to justify positions you already hold, but with an open mind. When we talk about January 15, to see that every death was a tragedy, that it was a deep tragedy for the North, the way the Sudowner was murdered. And we can't say, oh, I don't care about that. That's not part of my story. You have to see it and feel it. And you also have to get them to see that, look, stopping a pregnant woman on the road of Kaduna and killing her just because she's Igbo, it's a deep tragedy and you have to empathize with that. So it's this exchange of empathy, exchange of stories, exchange of perspectives, so that we see that it was a human tragedy, caused in most parts by ignorance, not knowing enough about the other person. But we have the advantage that they didn't have. We've had 50 years of living together. I've gotten to know you, my Yoruba brother. I've gotten to know you, my Hausa, in a way that Zeke and Awo and Ahmadu Bello didn't have the opportunity to get to know each other. We've slept on the same bunk. We've jumped in the same buses. We've hustled in the same places. So we know enough about each other to make better decisions about how we live together and how we move forward. And to understand that God put us here. No tribe in Nigeria migrated from anywhere. We are all indigenous to this geographical space. It was the Almighty Himself that made us neighbors. You can't change that. You can't drive the Fulani out of this is their home. You can't drive the Igbo out of here. This is our home. We are all indigenous to this West African geographical space. And therefore we must, the same way you talk about a pan-European identity, a pan-European culture and civilization, there is a pan-West African culture and civilization that we need to realize that we must live together. There is no multiple origin. All of us originated from here.
Can I go further on that great, great statement and say that actually we have a God-given duty to live together and live together well.
Yeah.
Stay with us. We'll be back in the last bit of this amazing discussion when we will turn to Dike again and say, so what does that mean, given our present dispensation, given our present political situation? Stay with us. We'll be back. Thank you for being with us. We're back again. It's been amazing. It's been truly, truly amazing. Words Dike has discussed. Every bit of the word and the thoughts that came out of his mind and his mouth have been deep and rich. This is a program many of you, I promise you, will have cause to replay over and over again and think about and reflect on. But Dike, let us zero in, because I think we're at this present time in Nigeria, we may have an unprecedented opportunity to make things right. We have a very important election coming up next year. It is our God-given opportunity to change things for the good. As we preach these ideals, which I say they're not ideals, they're the reality which we haven't claimed sufficiently. How should we translate those things you've talked about? A relearning of history, empathy, share understanding that our differences are less than our commonalities. How do we translate it into what we do in terms of the leadership we're in the process of choosing? How should it influence what is it? First of all, tell us what you think should be the right characteristics for the leader we choose next year. And how do we make that happen in the rights we exercise as voters, as citizens? Those two major things. Leadership, what should be the profile? And how do we, the citizens, who form the majority, exercise our citizenship rights properly?
I've always said that Nigeria can only be safe in the hands of a Nigerian. So that's the first criteria, that your leader must see himself or herself as a Nigerian, must have the capacity to carry us all in his or her heart. There is no bias or favoritism with regard to any ethno-religious group. That's the first thing, so that you can truly define and be faithful to a national interest based on justice to all, fairness to all, regardless of whose ox is God, who is lifted or who is pushed down, but that there is justice for all. And it's only in Nigeria, and only a real Nigerian, a true Nigerian, that can be that way with regard to this country called Nigeria. So that's the first thing. They must have somebody who is truly sees themselves and considers themselves a Nigerian. Number two, you must have someone who is, how do I put this? Who is able to use public funds for the public good. The greatest problem, or one of the greatest problems next to tribalism, is the fact that people use public funds to build personal networks, to build personal political networks, to service networks of loyalty. And it creates a chain reaction because everybody comes and is using money that should go to roads and hospitals is being used to buy loyalty ahead of the next election. So you need to have somebody who will be faithful with public funds and allow public funds to go towards the creation of public good. And for that to happen, it has to be somebody whose followership, who is followed, not for the personal pecuniary advantage that followers can get from that person. So it's not just a change in leadership, you need a change in followership. So we need people that inspire us to follow them for their ideology, for their values, for what they can do for the community, not what they can do for me as a person. If you don't have a leader that can transform the followers, then these patterns of behavior will only repeat themselves. So for me, those are three key things that I watch out for. Somebody that considers themselves a Nigerian. Somebody in whom public funds are safe. You can trust that they will go to what they're supposed to do. And then somebody who is followed, not for the money advantage that can be gained personally from the person, but because you believe in that person's values and their vision for society. Because that makes the relationship between leader and follower ideological as opposed to pecuniary and selfish. So today when somebody says, oh, I'm a big politician, what it normally means is that they've bought the loyalty of everybody. Everybody owes them in one way or the other.
Yeah.
Either you've given money or you've put this one in position, you made this one. So how can I take the opinion of somebody? If you're loyal to someone for these reasons, you're already biased. Because you will not be able to call them out when they go wrong because you owe them. So we need to follow people that we don't owe. There's a statement in the Bible where Paul says, follow me as I follow Christ. And he gives you the benchmark. That means that if he stops following Christ, you're free to stop following him. So you're not following him, you're following an ideal that he happens to represent. And the moment he stops representing that ideal, the bond is broken. There's nothing personal about it. We need that relationship between leader and follower. Follow me for my prudence. Follow me for my commitment to the national interest. Follow me for my visions for my country. Follow me for my track record. And the moment I break with that vision, then you stop following me. There's nothing personal about it. It's not that, oh, I owe you because you paid my mother's hospital bill. I owe you because you trained me in school. I owe you because you are the one that made me a great politician. In those cases, then, when I stop following you, to be like disloyalty. But who are we loyal to? Patriotism is loyalty to the nation, not to the government or to any of its officials, to the nation, first of all. So we need that shift in the mentality of followers. And it is a leader that will inspire that shift in the mentality of followers. So leaders that reinforce existing habits or follow me for what I can do for you as a person, that's not a leader to follow. We already know where that will lead us. That's where we're coming from. We're trying to go to the future. So for me, those three things, that you are a Nigerian and you see yourself as a Nigerian and you are comfortable with people from every part of this country, public funds are safe in your hands and will not go towards creating a private political army for yourself, but will go towards public goods. And three, that you inspire people to follow you because of your values and your vision.
Beautiful. I don't even need to recap that. But the last few minutes we have, Dike, let me ask you, because the vast majority of us are indeed the followers, what should we, the followers, do in the next few months to make sure we're good followers so that we begin our journey of greatness?
Rise above self. Remove self-interest. Forget about what you're going to get personally as a person or as a group, and think about what is best for the nation, for all of us. I'm a father with 4 children. Think about, for those of us who have children, think about your children. What kind of country do you want to live for your children? Think about what candidate best represents my values. My values, not my ethnicity, not my religion, not who is closest to me, not who do I have access to. Which one closely represents my values, comes closer to representing my values, about how a society should be run, about how a leader should be in a society. And have the strength of your conviction, even if it runs against settled ethno-regional patterns. Have the strength of your conviction to, as an individual, say, this thing is more consistent with my values, and therefore I'm going to follow it, even if it makes me the minority in my immediate environment. So we need to be proactive as followers. We need to be principled and value-oriented as followers. We keep putting the blame on leaders in Nigeria, but I've moved past that. I realize that the real problem is the Nigerian people and their mentality, because leaders come from the people. It is us that keep reproducing and empowering these leaders because of how we think. If you change how you think, if you say, look, I'm not interested in a contract, I'm not interested in being anybody's PA or being appointed to any government position. I am not interested. All I want is good roads. All I want is functional hospitals. All I want is good education. All I want is security. Even if I don't benefit from it personally, but I want to see that environment being created where all Nigerians are being lifted up. Once you make that your desire, the common good, you will free yourself from the propensities and the habits that have ensured that Nigeria has stayed down. Once you can tell yourself, even as an individual, and it's a very hard thing, the demons are in all of us. Many people come out saying one Nigeria with their mouth, but really they are rooting for Ali Igbo. They are rooting for Hausa people. They are rooting for Fulani people. They are rooting for Yoruba people. But they'll be saying one Nigeria with their mouth. But if within you, you actually get to the point where you say, you know what? An Hausa child is as deserving of education as an Igbo child. The hunger of somebody in Maiduguri I can't eat is not, why should I care more about the one in Onitsha than the one in Maiduguri? Once you start seeing the whole country as yours and all its people as your people, and start wanting what is good for all of them, you will see the way clearly to where we should go.
I don't need to ask Dike for any further closing words. I will reluctantly end this amazing discussion on one of his last words: the common good. This is the homework. This is the task before each and every one of us that are citizens of this country. We must make a personal and deep commitment that as we move forward, whatever the costs, we will only cast our vote. First of all, we must try and vote. This is one time when everybody must try. But in voting for that person that we genuinely believe and see will work for the common good. May the good Lord help us all to do so. We thank you. Do join us next week as we talk to yet another amazing, inspirational Nigerian. See you next week. Bye-bye.